There's that woman who faithfully holds babies in the nursery, week in and week out. Plus, there's that couple who gently leads younger couples, helping them figure out all that a marriage really can be. Plus, there's that guy who's always up for driving a minivan full of teenagers to their next youth event. Plus, there are key leaders who make visionary decisions about the direction of the church and are just fine with serving outside of the spotlight. Plus, the guys and gals who run sound and make sure that the right words are on the screen at the right time. Plus, the good people filling the seats who may or may not have their act all together. Side note, no one has their act all together. Add to that the man who arrived early today and pray with anticipation over every empty seat. A seat that would be filled by you today. We could go on, but you get the idea. When these less than perfect people are all added together, we're left with a special place full of special people. It's a group of people who are all figuring out how best to follow Jesus so that our lives leave his residue behind in every location and in every conversation. And somewhere in the middle of all this imperfection, we believe that God is smiling and that the bride of Christ is being revealed as beautiful and redemptive in spite of her flaws. And together, we're becoming something that God simply calls church. So can we count you in?
Pink flamingos are coming to Kilgore, Texas. They are scheduled to roost in yards around town from February 23rd to March 8th for the St. Luke's Youth Flamingo fundraiser. These flamingos travel in flocks and are highly territorial. They should only be removed by trained relocation experts. If the flamingos roost in your yard, you can contact Mrs. Shipman or Nikki Chowdhury to make a donation and have the flamingos moved to another yard along their path of migration. However, if you do not wish to see a pink flamingo on your lawn ever, you might buy an insurance for the prevention of pink birds for only $25. These fundraisers all in good humor, and all proceeds would go directly to the youth to help cover some of the cost of our summer camp and mission trips.
Good morning, my name's Rochelle. February the 25th is Fat Tuesday. We're going to have a gumbo cook-off, and for those who don't like gumbo, we'll also have pancakes. It will be at 5:30 in the Family Center. Hope you can join us.
Have you ever wondered what it felt like to live through the last week of Jesus' life? To walk the streets as people shout Hosanna? To be in the temple as tables are overturned? To be in the courtyard as Jesus is condemned? To hide your eyes as Jesus is killed? To wait anxiously as he is laid in the tomb? Starting on March 1st, we're going to begin our walk through Holy Week and experience the journey as Jesus and his disciples did. On March 1st, we will celebrate Palm Sunday. And then each Sunday of Lent, we'll move to the next day of the week until we make it to Easter. Make plans to journey with us through a Holy Week.
Okay, so when are the children waving palm branches? March the 1st. You got it. Good. Got your attention right now. Good. You know what I really like up here? I like it when I can see how people are getting used to not having to duck or hold their bulletin up when they come in this door. Isn't it great? All right. Well, let's celebrate God's goodness this morning. Let's stand and sing together. Heralds of Christ. That's what we are.
You declares them not guilty.
And there is no deception in their hearts.
Let us worship and rejoice in the one who is our hiding place.
And our refuge in times of trouble.
I now invite you to turn and greet those around you.
Today's scripture reading is from Revelation chapter 21, verses 6 through 8. He said to me, "It is done. I am the Alpha and the Omega, the beginning and the end. To him who is thirsty, I will give to drink without cost from the spring of the water of life. He who overcomes will inherit all this, and I will be his God, and he will be my son. But the cowardly, the unbelieving, the vile, the murderers, the sexually immoral, those who practice magic arts, the idolaters, and all liars, their place will be in the fiery lake of burning sulfur. This is the second death." This is the word of the Lord.
Thanks be to God.
We now invite the children to come forward for children's time.
Studying in school, have you studied opposites? In other
even people who are mean to us, right? Even people sometimes we want to not like, Jesus says to love them, right? That's what our scripture says. He says, love your enemies, and then you truly are a child of God. Because you know what if they were just having a bad day, right? And they were ugly to us, but they had a bad day at home, or somebody was mean to them. So we can maybe stop that cycle by showing them God's love, right? Just like I heard a story about a little boy who was being bullied, and his dad was kind of upset at first, but then he thought, I'm going to talk to the bully. And guess what? The bully was actually homeless, and he was actually getting bullied too because his clothes were dirty and not nice. So the dad took him shopping, and he got the bully some new clothes, and he helped him. He showed him God's love, right? So that's, even though it's super hard, that's what we have to try to do. When somebody's ugly to us, just still try to smile and show them God's love. Can you say a prayer with me, please? Dear God, please help us to show love to everyone, even when we're upset or angry. Help us to pray about it and show them love. In your holy name, amen.
They're making their way to Children's Church. I invite you to stand and join with me as we affirm our faith together. We are not alone. We live in God's world. We believe in God, who has created and is creating, who has come in Jesus, the Word made flesh, to reconcile and make new, who works in us and others by the Spirit. We trust in God. We are called to be the church, to celebrate God's presence, to love and serve others, to seek justice and resist evil, to proclaim Jesus crucified and risen, our judge and our hope, in life, in death, in life beyond death. God is with us. We are not alone. Thanks be to God. Amen. It happens once in the spring and once in the fall, but it is a great time to come and do a short-term Bible study. We do it on Sunday afternoons from 4 to 5, and there is a Bible study for everybody. We've got something for kids, for youth, for adults. In fact, we've got two different studies, one over a biblical book, and then we've got one that's focusing on trying to parent in the busy world. So I encourage you, I know it's already started, but it's only the second week. Please come and join us if you're free this afternoon. The other opportunity is next weekend. We are having our first Serve weekend of the year. 9 o'clock, we'll meet here on Saturday, and we'll start working on some projects. The main one being putting together a community garden. We've got some plans to have an area where we can grow some crops, and so I encourage you to come and be a part of that. I can build stuff and I can put dirt out, but I am phenomenal at killing plants. So I'm going to need someone who knows how to grow things come and be a part of that. On Sunday during worship, we will celebrate all of the missions that we have done at St. Luke's and celebrate what we've got coming. And then we'll have a luncheon where there will be all sorts of ways to learn about opportunities to be involved following the service. So if you can hang around for that, please bring a pot. A side dish? I'm trying to remember all this stuff. Please bring a side dish to go along. We'll have brisket for lunch. But it'll be a great time to fellowship and to learn more about how you can be involved. As we move towards our time of prayer, I would encourage you to look at the monthly prayer focus. St. Luke's mission team is the group we're praying for. And I want to not only lift up that team, but as we've got Serve Week coming up, I would like to lift up everybody we have here in different ways. And if you are looking for a way to serve or wondering how God might use you, please lift that up in prayer this week. Now I invite you to pray with me. God, this morning, as we come into your house, we come grateful. Because God, no matter where we come from or what we have going on, we know that you are here. We know that as we breathe in your Spirit. As we breathe out, God, we can release all of our worries, our fears, our concerns, because you are in control. Because God, you are providing for us in ways we can't even imagine. You are blessing us beyond measure. And God, we remember that this morning. And so we open ourselves up to you. We ask you to pour your Spirit down upon us that we might feel your very presence in our lives. We might be refreshed and renewed. So no, God, that no matter where we go, no matter what the weeks ahead might bring, we go knowing that you are with us. You are larger than anything we face, God, and that you are taking care of us. So God, we lift this prayer up using the one that your Son taught us. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not to temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, and the power, and the glory forever. Amen.
I hope you experienced what this next song is talking about. I surrender all, because that is another song that says that's the only way to be happy in Jesus, and that's the way it's surrendering to Him. Let's stand and let's sing together the first two verses. I surrender all.
We've been looking at people in our lives that we like to push aside. People that we consider to be outcasts. We've looked at them in Scripture by looking at different times Jesus has interacted with people on the fringes. We started with the Samaritan woman, someone who believed very differently than Jesus did. And we watched how these two interacted, and Jesus eventually found what brought them together instead of what made them different. Then we looked at the tax collector, the chief person who took and took and took until there was no more left. And again, we saw how Jesus called Zacchaeus out of this tree and called him by name. He took someone who was looking for significance and offered him something he couldn't find anywhere else. But the challenge hasn't just been to look at how Jesus worked with outcasts in scriptures. The challenge we've had is how do we work with people in our life that we have outcasted? How do we look at people who believe differently than we do? Maybe not the different religion, but maybe it's they look at parenting differently. Maybe it's they look at politics differently. Maybe it's they look at your choices differently than you do. And that's put you at odds. You've been challenged to look at people who take your patience, who take your joy, who take your sanity, who take everything they can from you, and so we kind of push them to the outside. And as much as those two groups, I'm sure there are people in your life that you can envision, people who you keep outside because of that, the group we're going to look at today probably is the largest of them all. And that's the people that we have pushed to the outside of our lives because they've hurt us, because they've wronged us, because they've done something to us that they shouldn't have done. I imagine it doesn't take very long to envision someone in that situation. Someone that you don't really want to be around because they've done that to you. Someone who you've cut all ties with because you just don't want them around. See, if we've noticed one thing throughout Scripture, it's that Jesus never really lets it stand to have outcasts, regardless of why it is. There was a bitter feud between the Samaritans and the Jews. The tax collectors took what wasn't theirs. All of these people deserved to be on the outside, and yet Jesus didn't really let that stand. So as we look at it, I want you to think about those people who have hurt you and how you view them. Jumping back to the passage in Revelations, we don't use Revelations a whole lot. It is the last book of the Bible. And if you have spent any time in Revelations, you know it is a very interesting book, to say the least. But the passage you heard comes from the very end of the book of Revelations. And John of Patmos has this vision that God has offered to him. And towards the end, God is talking about this new heaven and this new earth. Throughout most of Revelations, God is acknowledging that there is evil, that there is sin, that there is good, that there is bad, that that's the way the world is. All things that we understand and we know. But when we get to the passage that you heard a couple of moments ago, and that I'll read again, we get to a point where God is talking about something different. In fact, the chapter begins by saying a new heaven and a new earth. God is talking about this place where the sin and the evil and the grief and the pain and all of those things we experience, where all of the brokenness of the world is wiped away, and instead we encounter God as we truly should. And so listen to these words again. It's verses 6 through 8 in chapter 21. It says, "Then he said to me, 'It is done. I am the Alpha and the Omega, the beginning and the end. To the thirsty I will give water as a gift from the spring of the water of life. Those who conquer will inherit these things, and I will be their God, and they will be my children. But as for the cowardly, the faithless, the polluted, the murderers, the fornicators, the sorcerers, the idolaters, and all liars, their place will be in the lake that burns with fire and sulfur, which is the second death.'" As this passage begins, God is talking about this huge promise that in the beginning and the end and everything in between, God is there and God is present. Right? I am the Alpha and the Omega, the beginning and the end. In the beginning, God was there at creation. At the end, God was there. And in this new heaven and this new earth, God is there. And God uses these words that we heard a couple of weeks ago. He says, "I'm the one who brings water from that wellspring of life to those that are thirsty." When Jesus was talking to the Samaritan woman, instead of talking about all of the things that made them different, Jesus focuses on the things that everybody needs and says the same words, right? Jesus says, I can bring you waters from the wellspring of life. In the middle of that outcast situation, Jesus offers grace and hope. Because he knows above all else, whether we agree on politics or anything else, we can all agree that we are in need of God's grace. But the passage shifts not long after that in Revelation. It goes from kind of this pronouncement of all that is great with God to what happens if you don't entirely believe that or live a life worthy of it. In fact, there's this long list that God points out and says the cowardly, the faithless, the polluted, the murderers, the fornicators, the sorcerers, they will all be sent to this lake of fire, and that is the second death. So in this one passage, in these two short verses, we have very different ends of the spectrum. We have God's grace and God's forgiveness. We have God's mercy and God's presence. And then we have condemnation and damnation over here. Now the thing I want you to pay attention to in this passage is who does the judging as to where one falls. Who does the judging as to whether we see God as being faithful and loving and we aren't in that lake of fire, or if we wind up on that list that ends up in that second death? Because here's what I've noticed. When it comes to people who have hurt us, when it comes to people that have wronged us, when it comes to people who have done stuff to us that we don't think they should have done, we have absolutely no problem adding their name to that list of people that are going to wind up in the fire and in the lake of sulfur. We have this funny habit when it comes down to it. Instead of being agents of grace, instead of showing that God is there in every moment, when we have been hurt, when we have been wronged, when we have been pained, we have no problem showing that kind of condemnation and adding to that list of people who will not make it into heaven. It's this natural habit we have, it seems to be, of cutting people out that we don't like. That's not where God calls us to. It's not what God wants us to do. That's not what Jesus did. So I want to jump to John chapter 8, verses 2 through 11. It says, early in the morning he came again to the temple. All the people came to him and sat down and began to teach them. The scribes and the Pharisees brought a woman who had been caught in adultery, and making her stand before all of them, they said to him, Teacher, this woman was caught in the very act of committing adultery. Now, the law of Moses commanded us to stone such women. Now, what do you say? And they said this to test him, so that they might have some charge to bring against him. Jesus bent down and wrote with his fingers on the ground. When they kept on questioning him, he straightened up and said to them, Let anyone among you who is without sin be the first to throw the stone at her. And once again he bent down and he wrote on the ground. When they heard it, they went away one by one, beginning with the elders. And Jesus was left alone with the woman standing before him. Jesus straightened up and said to her, Woman, where are you? Has no one condemned you? She said, No one, sir. And Jesus said, Neither do I condemn you. Go your way, and from now on, do not sin again. Now, before we jump into this passage, one thing to recognize, and one thing that can't really be argued, is the woman was wrong. Right? They bring her before Jesus, and they caught her in the act of adultery, and the woman that is standing there was a sinner. She messed up. She made a mistake. She was wrong. That is a sad fact of life, is if we are going to go through life, there are going to be people that irrefutably have wronged you. People who have hurt you, people who have done things to you that you did not deserve, that you could not imagine, that you did not warrant. There are going to be people like that in our lives. The challenge that we're given isn't so much of how do we not have those kind of people around, but what do we do when we're wrong? What do we do when those kind of people enter into our lives and are front and center? How do we look at it? Jesus is teaching to a large crowd before him, just trying to teach about what it is to be a good person. And in come these Pharisees, and we read that they're doing it because they're trying to test Jesus. They just want to be rid of Jesus, and so they march in with this woman who was caught in adultery. She was wrong, she had sinned, and she knew it. But they bring her in, and in probably the most embarrassing fashion they can, they stand her in front of everybody, and they call her out. The crowd doesn't leave. Notice the passage doesn't say everybody gets up and wanders off and Jesus deals with this discreetly. The crowd is there as the Pharisees belittle and berate this woman. And Jesus stops and looks at them. How many of us have been in that spot before? Where we've been standing before somebody who has hurt us. And the only thing we want is vengeance, justice, is someplace to vent our anger and our frustration. And how many times have we done it poorly like these Pharisees are doing? And so they look at Jesus and they say, it is well within our right, it is well within the law, it is well within our religion to be able to stone her. She was wrong, we all know it, we're justified. And how many times has that same argument gone through our very heads? We have been wrong, we have been hurt, we are justified, we are completely valid in feeling this way, we are completely valid in doing whatever we want to do because they are wrong. And Jesus simply stands up and he looks at them. And we read that he bends down and he starts writing in the sand. And according to the Gospel of John, we don't really know what happened. We don't know what he wrote. But we know that all of those Pharisees are standing there looking at him and looking as he writes. Now I can imagine Jesus trying to handle this differently than the Pharisees did. Jesus has turned and is backing the crowd. And as he writes their sins in the sand, no one else can see it besides them. And he writes their sins. And I'm sure he writes a list of names. He writes names of people who have been hurt by the very people standing there. People who these Pharisees have been mean to. People who they have pushed around. People who they have caused harm to. He simply stands up and says, you who are without sin, cast the first stone. Right? How convicting are those words when we are hurt? How convicting are those words when someone has wronged us? Maybe not about casting a stone, but Jesus looks at them and says, if you have not hurt somebody, if you have not been wrong, if you have never been in this moment, then go ahead and do what you came here to do. But if you have ever stood in the spot that this woman is standing, then you don't really have a right to. How hard are those words to hear when we're the ones that have been hurt? How hard is it in that moment to think about the people that we've hurt? People that we haven't treated the way we should. People who we've pushed down and aside. So Jesus doesn't say anything else. He simply bends down and he keeps writing. And he's not paying any attention, but slowly, one by one, the Pharisees they go a different direction. They go away until Jesus looks up. And notice this is the first time anyone says anything to the woman that's standing there. She's marched in. No one talks to her. No one says anything. But Jesus stands up and he says, where are the ones that came to condemn you? They've all left. Jesus says, if they're not going to condemn you, then neither am I. And he looks at her, and he tells her to go and sin no more. That's important, right? He looks at her, and he knows she's wrong, right? She qualifies for that list of people that should end up in the lake of fire. He tells her, go and sin no more. She should be on that list. So should all of the people that have hurt us and have wronged us before, right? They should be. That is what they deserve. But instead, Jesus decides to offer something different. Decides that instead of condemning someone, how does it look to show them grace? What does it look to extend the very same grace to someone who hurt us as we have been extended before? This whole month we've been looking at how our relationships could be different if we didn't push people to the side. What would it look like if you breathed new life into the relationships that you thought were yours? This woman didn't get stoned to death that day, but she walked away with a new life. She walked away changed. Because instead of condemnation, Jesus offered her grace. I'm sure there are many points in your life where condemnation is valid, where your anger and your frustration are valid, where it would be right to cut somebody out of your life because of what they've done to you. How differently does it look if instead of being concerned with more people in that lake of fire, we're concerned with showing people God's grace, with breathing new life into places we thought were dead. There have been times we've stood where the Pharisees are, and there have been times where we've stood in that woman's spot. I encourage you, as you go out, as you look over the people in your life, find the times where you've been shown grace, and find the places where God is calling you to breathe new life. Let us pray. God, this morning we come before you grateful because we deserve so much differently than we have received from you. Because your grace has been poured out in abundance. So this morning, God, we ask that you help to pour us out. All the grace that we have received, help us to pour that grace out on everyone we encounter, God, on all those in our lives. It's in your name we pray. Amen. We have lifted our voices up in song. We have heard God's word read. So I now invite you to respond with your tithes and your offerings as the ushers come forward. God, we ask that you take these gifts, that you bless them and use them for the building of your kingdom. Amen. invite you to come forward as we stand and sing, Rescue the Perishing.
Amen.